Hey guys, welcome back to another Jurassic World Alive video, and today we're actually gonna go over, well, next part of the tier list, I guess, which is B+. So B+ is an interesting crowd, so really you won't be using any of these, I'd say, in your top tiers, later higher tier arenas, right? You won't be seeing Myosaurus in Gyrosphere, right? You won't be seeing, blues really high up there. So, but they are decently useful in mid to lower arenas for the most part. So, hey, if you have a use for that down there, then well, good for you. So, anyways, let's go over these alphabetical order, and I don't have Temerity with me today just because. I mean, it's B+. There really isn't much to talk about. Not going to make a hour-long video about it, right? So, anyways, let's go over Blue first then. So, Blue, 3,030 health, 1,190 damage, 131 speed, 5% crit, 10% armor with distraction, precise pounce, short defense. So, Blue got a lot better in the past few patches, but it does suffer from the meta overall, right? The new immune dinos, all of that, the tankier meta, a lot of dinos with slow moves are much more better, so that kind of hurts Blue a lot, but Blue still does what it does decently well. It's really fast, 131 speed, obviously, at an epic rarity, which is actually relevant for lower arenas, right? And you also have short defense, precise pounce, that combo with that 10% armor. You're not going to take as much damage, so you're super low HP. Won't hurt you that much, right? So, but the biggest problem with Blue is it just doesn't have too much damage in comparison to any of the other Raptors. It could survive quite a few hits and then, maybe dish out another pounce, right? But aside from that, it doesn't have too much. The not main skill, it's default attack, distraction is okay. It's an okay move. So, anyways, moving on to the next one, Bracky. Bracky used to be one of the better tanks in the game, but kind of fall off a bit ever since, the multiple nerfs it got. So here we are. 5,850 HP, 1,000 damage, 111 speed, 30% crit, and 10% armor with Spirity Strike, Bellow, and Rampage. So, I mean, again, for what it is, it still does its stuff decent. Like, the biggest thing is it just doesn't do as much damage as before, right? The damage, I mean, it still has okay-ish damage, right? Rampage with 1k base for something that has like almost 6,000 health, it's fine. 10% armor, it could take a lot of hits. Spirity Strike, Cleanse Distraction, right? That's always great. Bellow has some niche uses. If you play it around, correctly, it could save you a game. So that's for Bracky. Moving on to Carbon Enemies. Carbon Enemies is probably the strongest B+ tier on this list. It might even be A- here, right? You know what? Now that I think about it, it could probably sneak into A- tier. Carbon Enemies. It's just absolutely, it's a monster. 60% armor, 104 speed, 900 damage, 5% crit, 4020 health, and superior vulnerability, dig in, devastation, and immune to DOT. So immune to DOT helps it, obviously, since it got 60% armor. If it gets bled, the armor doesn't matter, right, for the most part. So that helps it. And with the 60% armor, you also have dig in, which gives you a shield for one turn and also recovers 25% of your health, which it's really hard to take out 25% of Carbon Enemy's health without an armor piercer or defense shatter, right, for the most part. And also it increases your speed. So with its slow speed, you could potentially find some outspeeds. You could go, Spear Vulnerability, dig in, Spear Vulnerability again, then throw out a Devastation. Who knows, right? And then, if you could potentially find an outspeed, if your opponent's trying to slow you as well, you could Spear Vulnerability and then dig in, then potentially outspeed them, right? And then go for that Devastation. The biggest problem with Carbon Enemies, I guess, is just because Devastation has a 2-turn delay, so you won't be doing too much damage until, like, turn 3, right? But, when turn 3 does come around, even though really low base damage, as long as you have hit him with a Superior Vulnerability the turn before, your Devastation is going to do a lot of damage, right? Because obviously you have the vulnerability plus the extra damage from Devastation. So yeah, Carbon Enemies probably A-, but we'll throw it in B+. If it's in B+, it's the best B+ in the game. So there's that. Moving on, Draco Gen 2. Draco Gen 2, I mean, it is what it is. I do still remember the days where Draco Gen 2 was like, a top tier dino in the game, but it's still not bad. It's just that the limitation for the 2 turns and the swap and rampage again just limits its uses so much, which is why it isn't as good as it was before. Comparison to Dracoceratops. Dracoceratops is just much better, right? You could swap it out. You could have multiple uses, right? With regen, acute stun, rampage. There's a lot of stuff that you could play around with Dracocera, and minimal speed up strike as well. With Draco Gen 2, you only have strike and impact, so you're here for a swap and rampage. Again, there are still uses for it. You could synergize it with some swap out dino, right? Something impact and run into Draco Gen 2. It's going to do a lot of damage, right? 3k health, 1.2k damage, 108 speed, 5% crit, no armor, because I forgot to read off its stats first. So, moving on, Kentrosaurus. Kentrosaurus is interesting. 4,350 HP, 1.4k damage, 120 speed, 5% crit, no armor. Superiority strike, Thagomizer, and distraction, medium counterattack. Kentrosaurus actually has a decent amount of damage because, first of all, it has a lot of base damage, and you also have a half counter, so that's basically what 2.1k damage, right, on a strike. And you also have a Thagomizer, so that's 2.1k. So plus the medium counter, you got a 2.8k damage on turn 1 potentially, right? And it's not slow either. It's 120 speed. That's pretty decent for what it is, and it has okay-ish HP, right? And just overall, very, very strong offensive, Stegosaur that could also take a few hits, I guess. Instant distraction, play around with that. Superiority strike, cleanse, distraction. Just an overall decent offensive choice for a Stegosaur. Moving on to Myosaur. Myosaur, let's go over stats first. 4.5k HP, 1,050 damage, 117 speed, 5% crit, no armor. With Superiority strike, instant rampage, impact and run, swap and stun. The biggest sell for Myosaur obviously is the instant rampage, right? It's a priority move that's a 2-time multiplier. But I guess the only drawback for that is you don't have too much base damage for Myosaur. It's only like 1,050, so you're not going to do too much damage with that instant rampage. But if you do find an opportunity to use it, you'll take out an enemy dino, which is all you really need to do in this game, right? And also, impact and run, obviously, you can, chain that in with whatever swap in dino, and it has a swap and move itself, swap and stun, which can be pretty clutch in certain scenarios. And Superiority strike, obviously, cleanse that distraction as well. The speed's okay. HP is not bad, I guess, for the most part. So overall, decent dino. Miragaia is interesting. Miragaia, 1,350 damage with a full armor piercing counter, in fact. And so Miragaia is going to be outputting a lot of damage for the most part, right? Its biggest drawback is it only has 3,000 HP, but it does have shielding decel strike, so you could always have that shield up for, every time you attack, right? And then you also have regen, so even though you're not regenning back too much HP, but as long as it's enough to tank another hit, you're going to deal another, armor piercing counter, right? And again, that's a decent amount of damage. And regen, obviously, if you could cleanse a slow or something, make yourself outspeed your opponent, it's always a great move to use. So overall, Miragaia, lots of damage for a common dino. It doesn't have too much HP. Speed's okay, I guess. And then it does a lot of damage. Again, another drawback of Miragaia is, it's a common, only has 2 moves. What can you do? But they're 2 really, really good moves. Shielding Decel Strike. That's a really, really great move with armor piercing counter. So, moving on. No Pad Titan. No Pad Titan is still around here, I guess. It's really not that great still. 40% armor, 108 speed, 1,000 damage, 5.1k health, 5% crit, Superiority strike, bellow, it's decel impact, long protection, and minimal counterattack. This thing is just, I don't know, it just doesn't do too much damage. It only has an impact, and then the minimal counterattack, it's only like 0.25 damage. That's only 250 added on. So you won't be dealing too much damage for the most part, right? Like a minimal counterattack plus a decel impact is what, 1,750 damage, and that's like your biggest damage dealing turn. You are pretty tanky. 40% armor with 5.1k HP. You will take a lot of hits, but with all these chompers running around in the meta, bleeders, even though bleeders do take a bit of backseat this meta, but you could still deal with it, especially at lower arenas, right? So there's that as well. But overall, it still has a pretty interesting kit. Bellow, obviously, a really, really interesting move to use around in certain scenarios. Long protection, just to add on to that tankiness. Like, if you get a long protection set up with this thing, you will take a lot of hits. You'll be able to take a lot of hits. And 108 speed. 108 speed's not that great, especially with all the 109s running around, so what can you do? Anyways, moving on to Tyrannosaurus. Tyrannosaurus, 4,830 health, 1,290 damage, 114 speed, 5% crit, no armor, Superior Strike, Greater Stunning, Rampage, Impact, and Run. So pros, a lot of HP, good multipliers, Rampage, and an Impact and Run, right? And also Superior Strike, great move. Cons, base damage, not the greatest. 114 speed, could have been better. But then again, you do have Superior Strike, and speed isn't really that useful on Tyranno, like, right? Because you do have a stun. So again, personally, I do like slower stuns. I do like stunning moves on dinos that are slower. That's why I'm not a huge fan of stuff like instant charge or like faster dinos with stuns, even though they are really, really good. But, you know, slower stuns, that just means you get to use 2 moves in a row. And first of all, it feels good. Second of all, especially paired with Impact and Run, you get a really, really safe swap out, right? So there you go, Tyrannosaurus. Moving on, Pachycephalosaurus. Pachycephalosaurus is interesting. So it has 4,050 health, 1.2k damage, 121 speed, 5% crit, no armor, shielding strike, decel impact, rampage and run, swap and stun. So it got really similar offensive capabilities as a Tyrannosaurus, right? It does slightly less damage if you really want to, you know, count the greater stunning rampage as, you know, an extra turn, because, you know, stun, you could use an extra move, you could either Superior Strike, then outspeed them, impact and run, get an extra hit in. But the one thing is, Tyranno, even though it could probably potentially do more damage, it has to swap out, right? Because after you use your greater stunning rampage, you need to get out of there. You really can't do much. You have to impact and run, either Superior Strike and then impact and run, or just impact and run. With Pachycephalosaurus, you could actually stay in. You could go decel, shielding strike, decel, just do as much damage as you can before you're about to die, and then rampage and run. And also, you do have swap and stun, which is also a good utility move as well. You have good speed, and you don't have as much health, but you do have shielding strike. And I don't even know why I'm making comparison to Tyranno. Maybe it's just because I just talked about it. Tyranno, you could cleanse distraction, and you can't do it with Pachy. So Tyranno, you'll do more damage for the most part, but Pachy, you do have more options if you do want to stay in and, you know, just fight with your opponent. So moving on, Post-Metrodon. Post-Metrodon is interesting. Post-Metrodon, I could see an argument for A- as well. You know, it's one of those dinos, right? 4.2k HP, 1.2k damage, 124 speed, 5% crit, no armor, defense shattering strike, ferocious strike, defense shattering impact, regen, and immunity. So this is your, I guess, budget magna. It's like a budget magna of a budget magna, right? And you get Post-Metrodon. Post-Metrodon, obviously, you do want to get a setup turn, but you don't have to. Like, unlike Gorgosuchus, people make this comparison a lot. Unlike Gorgosuchus, you almost always have to get that setup turn, or else, you know, that thing, a slow plus whatever, it dies. But with Post-Metrodon, you don't necessarily have to, since you do have a decent amount of HP, right? And with that speed, like, you don't have to, right? And like the benefits of actually having a setup turn for a Post-Metrodon isn't as large as the Gorgosuchus anyways, so you don't have to have a revenge kill with it. Although of course it would be beneficial, because you'll have a ferocious boosted defense shattering impact on your first turn against your opponent dino, right? But aside from that, regen is really, really good, especially with the okay-ish amount of HP, right? And also immune is this thing's selling point, right? It's basically this thing's selling point. So it's budget magna, or a budget trios. I don't even know. Whatever you want to call it. Moving on. Pachycephalosaurus. Pachycephalosaurus is here only because of its turn 1 damage. Let's not play games. This is why it's here. There's no other reason for why it's here. 3.6k HP, 1,450 damage, 126 speed, 5% crit, no armor. Defense shattering strike, ferocious impact, and adrenaline pulse. Ferocious impact, 3,263 damage on turn 1. That's an absolute monstrous amount. With 126 speed, you know, has a decent amount of speed as well. Downsides, it can't really take a hit. 3.6k HP, not too much HP to really, you know, deal with, right? And it doesn't really do much other than that, because after ferocious impact, you just have a ferocious boosted defense strike, which is still not bad, but, you know, you don't have too many options here. Moving on, Spinodon. Spinodon's interesting. Spinodon is one of the more interesting raptors, right? It's not technically a raptor, but its set is, you know, very similar to of a raptor's. So 3,000 HP, 1.4k damage, 129 speed, 5% crit, and no armor. with Evasive Strike, Precise Pounce, and Prowl. So Prowl is an interesting move, right? It is priority. It's not deliberate Prowl. It's the one with priority. So if you can actually get a crit on a Precise Pounce, that's actually going to deal like a decent amount of damage, right? And also now with the buff on Evasiveness, so that's going to help Prowl a lot, as well as Evasive Strike, right? So, got a decent amount of buff, and obviously Precise Pounce with 1.4k base, you're going to do a lot of damage turn 1 with the really fast speed, 129, right? So there's that. Moving on to Spinotraptor. Spinotraptor, I really think it's better than a lot of people give the credit for. So with 3,240 HP, 1.4k damage, 126 speed, 5% crit, and no armor, with Strike, Gashing Wound, Distracting Rampage, and Critical Impact, especially after the Critical Impact buff, right? You're gonna sorry, you're gonna be doing a lot of damage with that crit impact on turn 1, right? And then turn 2, you followed up with Distracting Rampage. So like your turn 2 damage is gonna be really, really good. People always think, they look at Spinotraptor, they see Gashing Wound, like, oh, Gashing Wound sucks, right? Gashing Wound really is like one of the worse bleeding moves in the game for the most part. But like you don't really have to care about that. Like Spinotraptor has so much more to offer than just Gashing Wound. Crit impact plus Distracting Impact, that's a lot of damage on two turns with 126 speed. The biggest issue with Spinotraptor, obviously, is its low health. Like, it could be used as a revenge killer, kind of. You could set it up. You could, if opponent's 1.4k HP or less, come in. You could strike, take it out. Then you'll have a Distracting Rampage. Because, obviously, it's better to use Distracting Rampage on turn 1 and then crit impact. Just because, so you don't die as easily. But, again, that scenario is very, very... it's going to be quite difficult to find. Some dino that could just be taken out with a strike with a Spinotraptor. So there's that as well. So moving on. The next one, Stegoceratops. Oh, how the mighty have fallen. So like Monostegotops, it got dumped on, right, in 1.9. So the biggest problem with Stegoceratops obviously is the huge stat nerfs. 3.9k HP now, 920 damage. Oh my goodness. 112 speed and 5% crit and 25% armor. With D-Cell Strike, Dig In, Slowing Impact, Greater Stunning Strike, and Swap and Stunning Strike. So it completely changed from what it was, right? So it used to be, an all-around slowing tank kind of dino, 2 stuns, you could do a lot of stuff with that. And now they took away one of its stuns, which is its biggest selling point, and they took away the better stun, honestly. they took away Greater Stunning Impact instead of Strike. And they lowered its base damage. Although you do have Swap and Stunning Strike to kind of, to kind of make up for that, I guess, a bit. But then again, it completely changes how it is. I'm not saying it's bad. It's still decent. Swap and Stunning Strike, really great move, right? Dig In would be much better if its stats didn't get nerfed. But, that speed increase, I guess, is nice. But then again, you also have 2 slowing moves. So, Stegoceratops, in my opinion, is just a mess right now. I really don't like it, how it is. But, again, it still does some stuff, I guess. That slow stun is okay. The Swap and Stunning Strike is fine. I just think it's much worse. I think, honestly, Stegoceratops' hit hurts more than Monostegotops', right? And also, the other point is immunity... Can't do as much as you could do before. That's why it's all the way down here. So, moving on to Stygimoloch. Stygimoloch is great. 3,150 health, 1.5k damage, a lot of damage, 129, shielding, strike, impact, and run, and instant charge. So really, really solid base stats, 129 speed with 1.5k damage, with an impact and run, instant charge. So you don't have too much great multipliers, but with that instant charge, you could potentially go for 2 moves, so it's more like a rampage, right? You also have impact run, which is an okayish multiplier, I guess, and also shielding strike, so you don't die that easily. With that higher speed, very likely in some scenarios that you would be using that before you get hit, so that's always great. Moving on to the last one on this list, Rex. So good old Rex made its way up here again, I guess, just because, again, slower dinos, more tankier dinos are more prevalent in this meta, so that actually helps Rex a bit. For the most part, a lot of the faster distracting dinos, they're not as good in this meta anymore. So again, that also helps Rex. 4,350 health, 1.9k damage, 102 speed, 30% crit, no armor, and Fan Shattering Strike, Fan Shattering Impact, Fan Shattering Rampage. It's Rex. It's pretty solid. Everyone know what it does. Super slow, does a ton of damage. that's all it's here. Fan Shattering Strike, Fan Shattering Impact, Fan Shattering Rampage. I mean, what more do you need to know about this dino? So again, that's me for this one. For those of you wondering, hey, why is Rex here and not Allergen 2? Allergen 2 kind of, I don't know why people think Allergen 2 is that good. Allergen 2 is not as good as Rex. Rex is much better than Allergen 2. Allergen 2 has a rending move, which really it's mind-boggling how terrible that is. Like your whole thing is, I have really high base damage, and then what you need is really high multiplier, and you give it a rending move. That's really, really dumb. So for anyone who are wondering about Allergen 2. But anyways, it's on the next tier. It's not that bad, right? It's on the next tier, but it's not as good as Rex. So anyways, again, that's gonna be for this one. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Like if you did, subscribe to your channel.